Welcome back to my garden. I thought I'd film in the same spot, not just because the blooms are perhaps even more splendid after the rain and it being a little bit overcast, but also there's a wonderful perfume, so welcome to my perfumed garden. Last week, Thich Nhat Hahn, arguably the second most famous Buddhist in the world, passed away. And I say passed away and don't use the word sadly because I don't think he'd really approve of describing his death as sad. It is just the nature of our existence, of human existence, the life-death cycle. And as a Buddhist, I don't think he'd see it as something sad at all. Also, he was 95. He'd led a good, very productive life and has left a legacy. Now, I say I met Thich Nhat Hahn. Of course, I didn't personally meet him. I came across him through his writings. But when people die, we often say that they live on through their work. So if they can live on through their writings, then when you read those writings, I guess you meet them in a very real sense. I first came across his writings on a trip visiting my friend Andy Mitchell in a small town, Moquegua, in the south of Peru. And I was staying in this room, which was sometimes used by a group of archaeologists. And they'd left behind, because they were going to come back again, they'd left a few books in the room, and one of them was a book on happiness by Thich Nhat Hahn. And I read it while I was staying there, and it really did strike me as some very powerful stuff. Simply written, but cutting right to the point. And what stuck with me over the years was that he gave a very simple recipe for happiness, which included two things, and this became the sort of foundation of a series of assemblies that I would do over the years. I'd take on a role at St. Paul's, which meant that I delivered lots of assemblies, and delivering a talk where you let people into the secret of happiness kind of got their attention. And it sort of came down to it, and we're 3 minutes into this little talk, so let's cut to the chase. The talk came down to the secret of happiness being to do two things. One was breathe gently, and the other was walk caressing the earth. What lovely phrases. Of course, I'm not sure this is how I remember the books. I've subsequently obtained one book of his, and it isn't that one. But I'll begin thinking about breathing gently. And that led me on to a strange connection, which I may well have mentioned in one of these talks before, where I remembered something that I'd read in my sort of deep dive into the history of athletics. I was a keen runner, and I'd read about the Soviet sprinter Valery Borisov, who was a double gold medalist at the Munich 1972 Olympics in the 100 and 200 meters. Now, one of his secret strengths, may well have been part of the Soviet nutrition boosting program, legal or illegal. I don't know, and let's be generous and say it wasn't that. But it was that he had developed a fantastic technique of breathing, because the whole purpose of sprinting is controlled, relaxed power. And his method of eliminating the build-up of tension in his running was to keep his mouth open to a sort of optimal level. And the way he trained this was using some fantastic technology. His trainers gave him a small little ring of paper which he would hold in his mouth, and that kept his mouth open at just the right amount to guarantee airflow, but eliminate the possibility of increasing tension from the sort of neck that would then spread through his body. And during his training exercises, runs, the coaches would examine the paper afterwards, and the objective was that the paper wouldn't fall out, but there would be no indentations or pressure points. So a fantastic idea. And when we think about Buddhism, I mean, obviously, the next thing that comes on is mindfulness and meditation. You know, that's obviously tied into it. And very often, these breathing exercises become quite stressful activities. But thought in this sense, and in the light of Thich Nhat Hanh's Breathe Gently, it's just about a slow, relaxed breathing. And if we can make that something habitual, it will percolate through our day and enable us to carry out our activities in a calm, stress-free sort of way. And if you've watched any videos of him speaking, there's a very famous one where he's interviewed by Oprah Winfrey. And he is a very calm man. He was a very calm man. His speech is, it doesn't lull you to sleep. It just calms you down. It takes the edge off everything. And of course, his other piece of advice that I remembered, whether this was exactly how he put it or not, was to walk caressing the earth, to walk mindfully but gently, gracefully. And sprinting, again, the objective is to run, but in a graceful way. Interestingly, the idea, and I'm not going to break down the sort of biomechanics of it, but the idea is that your driving foot, the ball of your foot, maintains contact with the ground for as long as possible, and whilst creating a sort of rhythmic, fast cadence. It's a very kind of counterintuitive idea. So it's not like jumping, but you maintain this contact with the ground because it's a sort of power generator. But it's done, again, without stress. So the idea really is that we do these two principal activities of ours, breathing and moving through the world, in a way that is graceful, is calm, is gentle, is, I suppose, hyper efficient. Because if we get that right, everything else flows out from there. And I thought about that, and I thought about the talks that I'd done. I also thought inevitably how I'd given this advice probably in the first, I'd first come across the books in, I guess, around about the mid-90s. And my first assembly when I spoke about this was in the mid-2000s. And here we are in 2022, And whilst I've revisited it from time to time, it hasn't become, these two activities have not become cornerstone habits, keystone habits, I believe they're sometimes called, where mastering that habit allows all sorts of other things to develop out from it. It's a sort of a hub on which you pin the spokes of your daily wheel. But that's fine, and I will come back to it, and I will keep on coming back to them. Right now, for example, I feel 8 years into my adventure in Paripuera that I have improved in the area of breathing, and I master things that make me stressful better than I did 8 years ago. I react to them better. I certainly haven't mastered my reactions. I'm on a path. But this great Buddhist thinker certainly gave me valuable insights, valuable fresh insights that may be quite obvious to you out there, and certainly if you follow that sort of practice, you're much further down the road than I am, and that's fair enough. But for me, in the middle of the 90s, when I was living a life of glorious hedonism, that book was a little pinprick of the direction, a hint of the direction that I needed to move towards. So that's it for this week. Thich Nhat Hahn, I trust you are at peace, a long-deserved rest before your next adventures, whatever that might mean. But thank you for what you've given all of us, and certainly I will try and put it a little bit more into practice from here on. At certain moments when I feel I'm being tested, or perhaps just on a regular basis throughout the day, I can ask myself the question, what would Thich Nhat Hahn do, or think, or suggest in a moment like this? And I could do much, much worse than follow